Hey, let's talk about a subject that no one talks about, but that I feel led and called to talk about, not only for my own organization, but for other organizations within the non-governmental and nonprofit fields. Hi, I'm Layson Race, Executive Director of the Layson Race Center for Racial Equity. We talk about all things equitable and ethical within the racial justice sphere, social justice in general, and also the mechanics of the work. If there's anything that I have decided a long time ago, was that it was really important to speak as much about how the sausage is made than to give you just a full plate of sausage. It's the same with money. It is absolutely important that we're able to talk with rigor, with integrity, and with absolute candor about money, particularly during this giving season. You could call this kind of the anti-Giving Tuesday video. Layson Race chose not to participate in Giving Tuesday for a number of reasons, and we're going to get into them. I think it's important that we get into them. One of the main reasons that we decided not to is because for so many people it's just distasteful. I have a very good friend who also happens to be my pastor, Rebecca Littlejohn, who actually said as much in a Facebook post that put me on tilt a little bit, activated me a lot, and made me want to scrap what I was going to say about Giving Tuesday and add some other things into it. Paraphrased, she and some of her friends were saying one way to absolutely guarantee that I'm not going to give you anything, not just for Giving Tuesday, but I'm going to take you off my list entirely, is if you bombard me with Giving Tuesday solicitations. I get it. I get it. For those of us whose funding depends on community giving, for those of us specifically in the racial justice sphere who because we are talking about social and systemic and institutional change as opposed to social work, giving out sandwiches, and nothing wrong with giving out a sandwich. I help do it on Saturday. But who do more social work, is that we're not going to get funded by big corporations or even by governments. We depend on the people who listen to us and who read us in terms of commentators and thinkers and activists. And I got to tell you, it's been a hard year, not just for Layson Race. As challenging as it has been for Layson Race, and it has been challenging, we're one of the lucky ones. There are a lot of racial justice spaces and individuals and groups that aren't here, even after the Black Spring, or even because of, perhaps, the Black Spring of 2020. People hear about millions of dollars poured into Black Lives Matter's coffers. People hear about even small endowments like our own here at Layson Race in 2020. And people kind of go, hey, I guess we don't need to. I think there's more to it than that, and we'll get to it. I've got 19% left on this computer, and let's see what we can talk about. But the fact of the matter is that even if Black Lives Matters had gotten $100 million, it's not enough to completely meet the need and fulfill the promise that has never been fully realized, starting from emancipation in 1863. And by the way, it's Emancipation Month. And it's important to note and realize that. But even if we start the clock from 1954, or 1963, the March on Washington, 1964-65 Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act, all the way up to the Black Spring of 2021. There is still work to do. But people want to do it on the cheap. People like to think that when they are doing something virtuous, that virtue should not cost. That is absolutely not true. And particularly when we talk about racial justice and social justice, and the people who provide services and thoughts to you. People are used to consuming social justice. And that's another video for another day. Basically, who gets to set the terms of the racial justice discussion? And let me tell you, very rarely is it people of color. It is dominant culture people who set the terms, who set the conditions, who decide what can and can't be talked about. And one of those things that cannot be talked about is funding what you say you want the world to look like. Let's talk about Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday feels like a time-honored tradition, that it's been around as long as Bing Crosby and Dizzy Gillespie, but it really hasn't. No, it's a relatively new phenomenon. It is a response to Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Giving Tuesday. Facebook itself says that it will do a dollar for dollar match for organizations that participate in Giving Tuesday, which is not completely false, but it's also an incomplete statement. Facebook promises $10 million, which sounds like a lot. It isn't, which sounds like a lot, but it can only be for certified nonprofits. Job one. Got to be a 501c3. And we all know that some of the most cutting edge work in racial justice and in social justice are done by people doing it on the seat of their pants. And they are not always given the imprimatur of the IRS. Sometimes they can't. It costs money to register as a nonprofit. Trust me, I know. And sometimes they don't want to. Both of those things are legitimate. It is a fallacy that IRS recognition confers any sort of moral or ethical legitimacy, or, for that matter, even program efficacy. It's a designation. It allows people to give with dollars that may or may not be taxed because you can get a deduction, although that's less compelling than it used to be because the standard deduction raised. But in any case, it is now a proxy for legitimacy. It shouldn't be, but it is. But let me tell you who it hurts the most. Smaller nonprofits who need your dollars the most. Even with that $10 million cap, we all know that most of that $10 million is going to go to larger organizations that may very well do good work. United Way, Red Cross, Susan J. Komen. Whatever you think of the big organizations, the 800-pound gorillas in the room, they are the ones getting the bulk of those donations. Even for registered 501c3s, and by the way, 501c3s can also do other funding mechanisms, but for pretty much the entire sector, non-governmental organizations, nonprofit organizations, for a lot of those organizations, this season between Thanksgiving and the end of year is when they make their nut, is when they make the bulk of their funding because they're appealing to community members who frankly don't want to be appealed to, and punish those organizations. I have to tell you the truth. I used to do it. If I get one more solicitation, one more email, they're sending me an email a day. If they send me one more email, I will close my purse. I've said that. But now, not only since I've been working in this sector myself, but also have been advising other people in the same sector, let me tell you, we hate it too. We hate going out hat in hand, hoping that we will not be punished for reminding people that this work costs something, particularly Black and brown people, particularly Black and brown women. People like to think that virtue activism and racial justice is considered part of that, virtue activism. That virtue activism should not cost anything, or if it does, it shouldn't cost more than a latte. And in fact, during the last 5 or 6 years that racial justice has been on the radar for a lot more people than it used to be, that's how it was funded. Give us your latte money for the week or the month or the year. We got to talk about this. We have to talk about how that lands on people who are doing work that everyone deems is important. That is mostly done by women and women of color. I've seen that in my own work. We are very much beholden to buffeting winds, changing dynamics, changing fads. What's trendy? In 2020, Black Lives Matter was very trendy. And then the verdicts came in 2021. People started balking a little bit, and there was legitimate. And you know, when you think about the social psychology of it, it makes perfect sense. There was donor fatigue, there was issue fatigue, and because most people like to think of racial justice work as a one and done, the idea that it's something that you are going to have to pay attention to and, yes, fund for the long haul was something that people kind of didn't want to do. They also didn't want to be reminded that social justice and racial justice work is anything but a one and a done. That is an incredibly big deal. So where does it leave small, scrappy nonprofits like ours and others? It leaves us in the Coliseum in a very toxic kind of Hunger Game, fighting for scraps. So you have the big 800-pound gorillas who everybody knows are going to take the bulk of this $10 million. Then you've got everybody else fighting for scraps, appealing to an audience that doesn't want to hear from them and is angry that they're hearing from them and will punish them for doing it. I answered my friend Rebecca. I'm going to scroll a little bit. She was talking about how she was ruthless about deleting emails, and her friends chimed in, and I found myself having to chime in myself. And I'm going to read what I told her, what I said. Let me find it. It's here. Here I am, Lace Janine Watkins. That's me. I said, I'm going to do my annual Anti-Giving Tuesday, but still, please consider giving to Lace on Race video later on today. And I went on to say, Rebecca, oh my gosh, I hate it too, so much. But for most of us in the secular NGO world, this is what makes or breaks. This month, between Giving Tuesday on December 31st with end-of-year tax giving, it's distasteful. I feel like I need to take an acid bath after I do it, but I absolutely do still do it. Particularly since giving across the board has been down for secular organizations this year, particularly the smaller ones. And usually it's the big 800-pound gorillas that get most of the funding on days like these, leaving the minnows like Lace on Race to beg for scraps. If people were more disciplined like you, who had a regular giving schedule and who gave without asking throughout the course of the year, not this one discrete 31-day time period, the need would be less. But they aren't. They don't give. Looking at you all watching me eye to eye, neither do you. 99% of people who watch or read Lace on Race do not give a dime. The need is there. So yeah, I collude with a crappy-ass system. One thing I'm not going to do is participate in Facebook's promotion. People think it's a dollar-for-dollar match for every single organization, but in truth, they're only committing to 10 million, and that doesn't stretch very far. So there's that too. LOR will not use that mechanism. We trust that our constituency will hold us well without that additional incentive, but it's still hard AF. So yeah, I hear you. And basically, she wrote the video for me today. Another reason that Lace on Race has decided that we don't participate in Giving Tuesday is for exactly the reason I just said. All of the little minnows swimming in this ocean. As challenging as this year has been for us financially, and it has been challenging, we have not made our very modest goal even 1 month in the year 2021. But we are still standing when so many others haven't. And I want to make sure that other people have voices and platforms. We're not the only game in town. We don't want to be. We want to set the conditions so that there are myriad voices, which is one reason why we have community partnerships, which is one reason why we fund the Mental and Emotional Health Fund. And we want to do more, but we can't do it without you. But let me tell you why we specifically don't do Giving Tuesday. One, it sets an awful precedent. It sets an awful example, and it's giving absolutely the wrong message. Rebecca Littlejohn is absolutely right when she says this. People should have a disciplined giving plan for the entire year. Maybe they should look at it every quarter or every half year or every year, but it shouldn't be a surprise, and it shouldn't be something that they only do for 1 month out of 12. But that's exactly how people do it. And particularly when you're looking at social change work, where we are confronting and criticizing systems and institutions, we are not just handing out the sandwich, but we are asking, as Padrago Tuomo would say, we are asking the better questions as to why the sandwich needs to be given out. If we were living in an equitable and just world, no one would be handing out sandwiches on the corner of 25th and Commercial in San Diego, California, or at Skid Row in New York, or in the Bowery, or wherever there is need, because need would be lessened, harm would be lessened and mitigated. There's an article that I'm going to link below that I've had in my back pocket for over a year now. It is from, of all places, Town and Country, and it was talking about how people of conscience should be considering giving to Black Lives Matter. It was in 2020. I agree with the thrust of the article. It is written to people who, Town and Country's demographic, high net worth or aspirational high net worth. But one of the things it said is, if you wonder if you've given enough, you probably haven't. We're going to be talking about this in the Dimes Challenge and in the Envelope Challenge starting in January of 2022. But for now, let's talk about the idea of can't versus won't, which we've already had the conversation with in Les Son Race. But also what it means when someone basically says, I've given enough. And particularly with social change organizations and initiatives and groups and individuals and thinkers and commentators. One way to get over a certain amount of ambivalence about creating the world that you say you want while you're being the person that you say you want to be is to defund it, to divest from it. Again, if it were only about Les Son Race, it would be one thing. I probably wouldn't even say anything because it seems opportunistic to talk about giving trends and giving dynamics when we depend on donors like you. But not just us. The reason we started community partnerships is because one of the things I used to say on Les Son Race, and I still do, is if not us, then who? Write it down below in the comments. Who are you giving your money to? Who are you supporting? Who do you want to amplify? And it would be crickets. So we started coming up with community partners so that we would just do the legwork for you. Here you go. We gave it out of first fruits. We still do. We always will. Because left to ourselves, we, and I'm including myself, we don't do the work. I can roll my eyes at all the emails that I'm getting, and I get a lot. Because once we give to an organization, of course, they know our email, they're going to keep going and going. And my own personal giving on my personal emails and in my personal page, I need to stop being mad at them for that. If I'm going to be mad, I'm going to be mad at the Hunger Games kind of system that forces them to do that. Why aren't I thinking about who I want to be and who I want to fund on a monthly basis so that they do not have to come at me hat in hand towards the end of the year? And for the most part, I do that. There are newer organizations because there are organizations that come up the pike all the time. And there's nothing wrong with looking at your giving allocation. And yes, we are talking giving allocation. If we want the world we say we want, we need to be willing to fund it. And we need to not punish the people who are doing the work we so believe is so important. So I challenge you all. This Anti-Giving Tuesday video is indeed an ask. Yes, we want your end of year giving, both in small amounts if you want to partner and add to the endowment so that we can build up our reserve, so that we can do the work we need to do in terms of scholarships, fellowships, conferences, resources. Then you can do that, and there will be a link and someone to talk to about that. If you are not a sustainer yet, start thinking about becoming a sustainer for 2022. As I said in the previous ask, we need an operating budget in order to stay sustainable of no less than $10,000 a month. And that sounds like an awful lot of money, but it actually is not. We do amazing things with that money. Most of the work that we do for individuals and groups at Lace on Race is pro bono. It's very much Robin Hood. We depend on you to help us be able to do that. We say that we honor Black women. We need to do that, not just at Lace on Race, but everywhere. And it's down across the board. We had a discrete event that happened in February where an intern of mine decided I was a cult leader and also decided that she was going to sabotage. She tried her best to bring this organization down, and a lot of people left with her, and those that stayed, which were 99% of you, about half of you closed your purses. Quietly, I have to ask, if not us, then who? For those of you who did close your purses in 2021, go ahead in the comments, name who you are giving that money to. I will celebrate each and every one of them, and I will amplify each and every one of them. We may even use some of them as community partners. But see, the fact is that most people didn't. They certainly didn't fund the individuals and organizations that had to close their doors in 2021. Racial justice cannot depend on readership and viewership's transient feeling states. There were people who were killed by the police in 2021 too. There was someone who didn't get a job in 2021 too. There was someone who was discriminated in housing and redlined in 2021 as well. There was a child who was beaten up in school in 2021 as well. There are systems and institutions that still need confronting and challenging in 2021 as well, and in 2022. We have been here even as the excitement level dropped. One of the things that we are going to learn once and for all at Lace on Race is that you do the work, and that includes financial engagement, regardless of whether or not your blood pressure is rising, or if you have a dopamine rush, or if your adrenaline is going. Or not. So this Anti-Giving Tuesday video is both an encouragement. It is a flat out ask. If I had a hat, I'd have it in hand. Help us. One way you can help us is to do it before we ask. Another way is to not be mad at us for asking. When you punish thinkers and commentators and organizations that are doing the work that you say is important, that ambivalence shows through loud and clear. And I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't want anything exciting that galvanizes white people for a week and a half, like what happened in 2020. Because what excites white people are Black people dying. Damn it! I wasn't going to cry. If the only time you care about our lives is when MSNBC tells you to, that's not caring for us. If the only way you allow us to do this work is when you get a dopamine rush or a self-esteem boost or a virtue signal. That is not walking with us. And again, it's not just about me, even though it is about me. Here's another fun fact that you all need to hear, and it's hard to say. Even before what happened in February with my intern, Holly, financial engagement went down the minute I retired from the county and became executive director of the Laysan Race Center for Racial Equity full-time. It occurred to people that, oh my gosh, she's drawing a salary now. The only way that dominant culture is willing to give Black women money is when we are doing it for other folk. That's a really big deal. That's a really big deal. So in 2020, Chromebooks, yes. Jim and Kate, yes. The Christian left, yes. And for other sites that do direct giving, a form of reparations or restitution or recompense, sure. But the minute Black women who are front and center when it comes to racial justice, in particular social justice in general, the minute that white people thought, oh my gosh, she's actually buying sandwiches with my money. She may be paying her rent with my money. I wonder what kind of car she drives. Then it goes down. And not just for me, but for everyone else. And we have to really look at the violence of that. We have to look at the dynamic, the slave mentality dynamic that Black women are allowed to nurture and stand with and for and amplify. Everyone but ourselves. And we will get punished if we dare talk about it. Well, I will talk about it until the very last light goes off. Giving Tuesday is a little bit of a sham. It does not hurt the people who are doing the most cutting edge work that larger nonprofits may or may not kind of pick up and kind of dilute a little bit to make it more palatable to people who write $1 million checks, make it more palatable to a government who may or may not give a grant. But for the people who are doing the work that moves the needle, they get nothing or next to nothing. And again, I realize how opportunistic it can sound for me to talk about this at all. We are doing, comparatively speaking, relatively well, even though our revenues were slashed in half. And then people say, well, what about that endowment? What about all that money? Well, that money is going to go in a year. Racism will not. White supremacy will not. And we also are going to have to, and we can talk about this in a different video because I am running out of juice, about what it means when dominant culture people, white women in particular, think about the idea that this work could enrich us. One of the unspoken deals, toxic deals, bad deals, as Terry Real would say, that we make is that we will never do better than you on the aggregate. I live modestly. I've always lived modestly. It's part of my Mennonite roots. But the idea that someone thinks that I'm driving around in a Lamborghini or that, I have a full tank of gas in my Santa Fe is anathema to some people. And if it's true for me, it's true for everyone else in the sphere. We ask a lot of you here at Laysan Race. We ask for your intellectual heft as you comment and as you respond. We ask for your sense of community and of chesed. And yeah, we ask for money, and I will not apologize for that. We give to community partners out of first fruits because they deserve to be seen and amplified and affirmed and their work deserves to be continued. So, I'm going to be really sharp. Who else are you supporting? Put it down in the comments. If not us, then who? This anti-giving message was brought to you by the Lason Race Center for Racial Equity, who will be here for the long haul, lessening and mitigating the harm endured by Black and brown people, perpetuated by white people and white supremacy, which are economic constructs. Those who benefit from racism and white supremacy have a moral and ethical obligation to put financial skin in the game. If not at Lason Race, although I certainly hope it is, if not at Lason Race, then in the entire sphere itself. I will give no quarter on this. But I will give dimes, because the dime challenge is coming up. We're going back to basics, y'all. How to live this out when it's not exciting. How to do it well and with reliability and relentlessness, even though you don't get an adrenaline rush. How to make sure that the people who are doing the heavy lifting are paid fairly, whether it's here at the center or in the entire racial justice arena as well. This Anti-Giving Tuesday message is a reminder that racism and white supremacy don't sleep, and neither do I. Coming at you at 1:21 a.m., and neither should you. Please give to the Lason Race Center for Racial Equity. Your year-end giving will help us to continue this work, and your sustained giving throughout the rest of 2021 and into 2022 will allow us to do it with confidence and with stability. Thank you.